All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for watching this little video series I got going on here. We're continuing my little journey to making a deck building game about inanimate objects that become sentient and take over the world. So, I think the last episode I talked about maybe we need to write the rules out, get the basics sort of like get everything laid out nice and neat, maybe like on paper, so to speak. And I think we're not going to do that. I think we have enough. I think the what ifs, the how tos, the what do we really want this to go, I think they're going to be better answered once we start playtesting. So we have enough, I think, to start with. We have the skeleton of a game, essentially. We have the main deck. That's going to be the primary source of cards for the players. That's pretty standard in deck building games. Then we have these emotion set up here, these 4 emotion type cards that are going to be available for purchase. And then we're going to have the follower lineup, which will be the objective lineup that sort of drives the game forward, as well as the primary source of victory points for the game and things like that. And I think really, the main deck thing, that's pretty simple, pretty clean cut. It's all about the card design. When it comes to the follower track, a lot of what ifs. And I think it's just we need to try different things, see how it feels. And I think really the only thing here that we have that's like truly, truly unique to our game at the moment is these 4 emotion cards that I'm going to have available next to the lineup. And I think we just need to bust out these cards, make these 4 emotion cards. Maybe we'll make the starter deck, we can start with something super simple. Then try and bust out as many cards as we possibly can in an hour. Keep in mind, we're only like... I haven't not really been working on this. I haven't been working on this outside of these videos. I've just been thinking about it, right? Been thinking about it in my spare time. So we're only 2 hours dedicated, really, for the most part, to this board game. So if we can get a working prototype, I don't know, within... I don't know what a good time frame is. Within 8 hours worth of work, then that'll be, I think, really nice. Really nice. And then we can start playtesting and figuring it out. Start answering some of those questions. So I've been thinking about the emotion cards. And my initial thought was, they're all 4 available. They all do something slightly different, but they maybe all cost the same, blah, blah, blah. I think I really want these 4 cards to sort of embody the idea that you can have skill expression as a player, that you can see some cards, one of these cards, and it really resonates with you. For these cards to be wildly different from each other, to encourage different play styles, all like sort of in themselves. But in addition to that, have cards in a lineup that obviously synergize with a variety of these cards, and so you sort of do this blend of like which of these cards, emotion cards, do you like? What cards show up in the lineup? You sort of stitch together this blend of like what you enjoy and what makes sense for the game that's happening and things like that. And I think there's a lot of potential there for skill ceiling and depth and things like that, and hopefully not too crazy complicated. And so I have a card idea for SAD. And I do sort of want, in a narrative sense, these cards to somewhat embody the emotion itself. And for SAD, we are going to have draw 1. And the mechanic is just you purchase these cards, they go in front of you, they're constantly in your play zone. So plus your hand, plus these emotions, you have the ability to sort of like work together with them in a sense, right? So we're going to tap these emotions like you would tap mana in Magic the Gathering. And you can tap it once and then you use the effect. And the catch is going to be that at the start of your next turn, you can only untap 1 emotion, and there might be some cards that obviously manipulate that element, but that's a whole other mechanic in itself, right? So essentially we'll have draw 1, and then it will read, at the end of your turn, draw 1 less card equal to the number of SAD cards. The number of... I would have tapped. Tapped SAD. The number of tapped SAD cards. Bam. And I think, too, to help differentiate these cards even more, is that I think they definitely should have different costs and maybe victory point values. So The idea here is it is going to cost 2, because this downside is huge. You're essentially paying it forward. I'll have a bigger turn now at the expense of my next turn potentially sucking. And that's kind of sad, right? And kind of sad. And regardless of what ends up happening on your turn when you pop off with the sad emotions here, potentially you might have a sad looking hand only holding 2, 3 cards, potentially, right? I think that's just sad in general. Let's do some copy pasting for our spaces. And in addition to that, we're going to have VP 0. VP 0. I think that's what we're working with. I think, of course, when it comes to all the numbers and little details like that, we can tweak them over time. The general concept is that easy means of power, next turn drawback, and super cheap, easy to acquire. Just like sadness in real life, right? And at the end of the game, no victory points, no one's a winner with sadness. Fear, surprise, I also got an idea for here. This is going to be reveal the top 2 cards of your deck, gain understanding equal to their BP values, then discard them. Then discard them. And sort of fear surprise, right? You don't know what you're going to get, revealing the top 2 cards. And when it comes to fear surprise, sometimes surprise is good, and typically fear is bad, right? So with this kind of card, if you don't know what's on top, you might be really fearful in a sense to activate this card, because discarding a potentially really powerful card could suck. And though it's going to yield you some benefit right now, might be really bad. So there might be some fear involved in using this card. Sometimes you might be surprised to get some crappy cards. Also, too, if you reveal a card that has no VP value, most of the time that's going to be one of your starter cards, and those are crappy anyways. So discarding them is sort of a nice surprise anyways. Really like this idea. Really like this idea. And I think that'll be it. And I think, because I can't think of a drawback. And one potential drawback could be like, at the end of your turn, discard the top card of your deck. Something like that, right? An extra bit of fear surprise. But I think we can just leave it as is. And I think because this is going to ultimately be far more powerful card than sad. Make it cost 5. BP value 1. BP value 1. I think that's the key here. And when it comes to anger and disgust, I'm not entirely sure. Happy is something that you need to always be happy with. Right? Always be happy with. Also, too, my original thought was like sad could be cycle 1, which is draw a card and then discard a card. But I think also to help separate them as much as possible, I want to avoid as many have overlap as far as the keywords are concerned. So we have draw 1. So actually just buffed sad a little bit, right? Because I don't want to have 2 emotion cards that synergize with discard effects, right? When it comes to getting cards in the main deck. So we want to draw a card and discard effect. Not entirely sure what's going on here with these other 2. Anger. I got a little emotion wheel here that I can look at for inspiration, right? Anger, mad, humiliated. Disgust is like disapproving, disappointed, awful, repelled, disrespected, hostile, furious. I feel like anger needs to have a very clear cut of just like some sort of like sense of aggression. There needs to be some obvious side effect, some sort of drawback here. But I think for at least with fear surprise, sometimes it goes fine. Sometimes things you fear never come to fruition. So I think it's fine that fear surprise has no real downside other than the effect itself, which can be good or bad, right? It's all sort of combined into one. I'm quite pleased with how these 2 look right now. And I think in a very general sense can potentially resonate differently with different players when they read these cards and go, oh, that card makes sense to me. I think it'll be doubly true when we make cards in the main deck that synergizes with them in some sense or another. I don't know, maybe we make this cost 4 and VP 0. Yeah, I guess we won't worry about the numbers too much, right? Those are all little things that we'll tweak as we're playtesting. But anger, disgust. How do we do something that's angry? We could destroy something. But disgust. When I was looking up these emotions originally, I was very surprised when a couple of different websites and different couple of papers talked about how anger and disgust can be tightly linked together. I don't know. I feel like sometimes disgust and surprise are the same thing. Does it make sense? Horrified, disapproving, awful, repelled, distant, critical, aggressive, frustrated, annoyed. So part of me feels like there should be like a heavy RNG thing. What if we rolled a dice? What if we had a dice rolling mechanic, multiple cards, potentially had something that rolled a dice, like a D6? Would that slow down gameplay too much? Is that too slowing? With the test, I mean, it have to be all of them would need to be super simple, like roll a dice plus power equal to the dice roll, like nothing too fancy or complicated. Anger, disgust, roll a dice. I don't know. I'm not sure. This, I think that's like the disgust part. Oops, throws me off just a tiny bit here. What about happy? What are we always happy to do in a deck building game? What are we always happy to do? What makes us happy? What makes us happy in a deck building game? Drawing cards, right? What's fun? What is fun in a deck building game? Nobody truly knows. Maybe happy is super flexible. Right? What's fun, right? Drawing cards. We got destroying crappy cards. Wombo combos. What makes us happy in a deck building game? Something that we're always sort of stoked for. Maybe we do always happy. That doesn't always work though. I was thinking maybe we have a put a card from our discard pile on the bottom of our deck or top of our deck or something. Bottom of our deck. Would there be synergy within the two emotions, right? Like happy, surprise, and so we can remove some of the fear by triggering happy first and put cards on top of our deck with an effect. Maybe happy is as simple as like +2. +2 understanding. Put a card you bought/gained. Turn on right on top of your deck. You'll accelerate. I feel like happy is maybe like it could be literally anything. Like this one could be literally anything and how it works, right? Like something like that. Maybe this is too good. Like this is too, like this is not pointed enough, right? Like there's not enough interaction going on here. I'm not happy with this, but we'll leave it as is for now. I'm not happy with that. I think there's something interesting going on here as far as how you plan your turns out and what decisions you make with Sad and Fear with these two card types or these two cards as they're written. This is too good. How are we always happy with something, but we have to make decisions? Because this you're not really making any decisions other than just if you're gonna pop an emotion once a turn, it's this, and you do it every time, right? Also, too, this is actually too good. No, I think about it. Starting out at the beginning of the game, popping that, buying a happy early, and then popping it literally every single turn is so much deck acceleration. Actually, too good. Do we bold an understanding? We'll do that. No, we'll come back to it. Anger, disgust. Maybe it's as simple as destroy a card. Destroy a card in your hand. Understanding equal to its cost or VP value. And maybe it's destructive somewhere else. Maybe we can make anger destructive somewhere else. Like the sort of representing the anger is destructive against yourself as well, towards and towards others. Maybe we just do this. Destroy a card in the lineup. In the lineup? In the lineup and replace it. You can sort of like so this is beneficial to us in that if there's a card in the lineup that we're not interested in buying, we're looking for a particular card type or some sort of synergy or wombo combo, we can destroy a card, replace it, and we essentially get to see 6 cards in the lineup. So it's beneficial to sort of like stacking the odds in our favor as far as finding a purchase that we really want in our deck. It's also angry because we can potentially destroy a card that we know somebody else really likes. So we can use it sort of aggressively towards somebody else. But I think we need to have a downside here. I think we need to have a downside here. What could be a downside? Some other sort of destruction, some sort of self-destruction, but it can't be a starter card. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I want to avoid having another discard effect. I was thinking like maybe the cost of playing this card is you have to discard a card from your hand that costs 1 or greater to trigger the effect. There's another discard effect though. Maybe the card revealed forces the player who uses this effect to have to do something bad, right? Maybe in order to play this card, you have to put X amount of cards from your hand on top of your deck or something like that. It's not the end of the world if you have to drop good cards on top. What happens if you cannot though? What if you play your entire turn and then trigger this card? We would have to say in order to play this card and then replace it. If you cannot, right? Because what if it read destroy a card in the lineup and replace it? The card put X amount of cards equal to that card's VP value from your hand on top of your deck. If you cannot, what? If you cannot, maybe it's more simple in terms of have minus understanding for this turn. But no, that's still the issue of how to word this card. It's either you can trigger this effect, and when the effect is triggered, if we have the new card revealed be a part of the downside to this card, how do we word it in a way that in order to, before you play your hand of cards, you have to do this first, sort of thing? So I was also thinking like in terms of just like the card revealed reverses your total understanding for this turn, right? So you might have a 10 understanding turn, 10 power turn essentially. The new card revealed is expensive or costly. It's -3. You might be disgusted by what's revealed because of how it affects you. I'm not sure, but I think we're onto something here. I really like this idea of a destroy a card in the lineup and replace it. There's a benefit. There's a clear and obvious like a disrespect to it because you can obviously use it to destroy cards that other people are going to want to purchase. So there's like a hatefulness to it in a sense, or despising. Yeah. And I think the repercussion here ends up being the disgust of it all. I feel like we're close. I feel like we're close. And I like the idea of it being the card that is revealed is a big part of it. Maybe it's this. Maybe maybe there's a card in life and replace it. Put put X starter slash. It's another thing too. We need like a bad card. We need like a weakness card, a threat card. We'll just write it in for now, but we don't really have one. Put X starter slash threat cards from your discard. From your discard, play zone, hand. Oops. I'm thinking of how to word this. Maybe we'll go over the Magic the Gathering style. Put X number of starter cards from your discard play zone, from your discard pile play zone hand, on top of your deck. X equals cost of the card revealed. Using yeah. Now, one thing too is that if somebody purchases multiple anger cards, eventually you won't be able to fulfill this, right? Let's say you do it twice, and the first time you do it, you put literally all of your starter cards that you have available on top of your deck. So the second time you do it, you have to do it free, essentially. But I guess that's where the mechanic of you can only untap one at a time at the beginning of your turn. You can't potentially do it every turn. Hello, baby? The child is getting upset for some reason. It's so spooky to hear her cry, but she doesn't move. Definitely having nightmares or something. I'm distracted. I gotta look at my baby here. We might need to intervene for just a second. See if she can figure it out. She's usually pretty good about figuring it out. But we've started like having her sleep with like a blanket and a pillow now. She's pissed. She just woke up and threw something out of her crib. She's angry. Okay, I'll be right back. Be right back. There'll be a timestamp. There'll be a timestamp for when I come back. Think about it. There'll be timestamps for this. But thank you guys for hanging out. Appreciate it. Actually, wait. You may have figured it out. Hold on, I'll be right back. Timestamp. It will be a timestamp. Thank you. 3110 ish. Like 3115. We're here. We're back. Welcome. Sorry, my baby. Actually, I'm not sorry. Forget you. My baby's a person. She's allowed to cry in her sleep. Had to go deal with my baby real fast. She needed some assistance getting back to bed. I think we're good to go. So for the anger disgust, I really like this effect. I think it makes sense to me. I think it fills into the theme of it all. Fills into the theme of it all. And I'm not 100% about this effect, though I do sort of like the idea that there's like a crap. You activate the anger effect, the card is replaced. You sort of roll the dice a little bit, and then you got to put a bunch of starter cards on top of your deck because the thing you drew is maybe something that's super expensive, and you can't use it. A lot of potential there for some disgust to happen, right? Disgusting. How much does it cost, though? How much does it cost? How much do we pay for such a thing? 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? Maybe this costs 3. I don't think this is a super amazing effect. Does it give victory points? Does it give victory points? Let's say it does. Let's say it does for now. Let's say it does for now. Get all these to line up. And now we're just on the happy here. And I think... Let's see here. We got something that costs 2, something that costs 3. I think we want happy to cost 4. Ideally. And it's a card that potentially has no downside. But how do we make it interactive? How do we make it do stuff that makes the player think about how they should be using it in their turns? And also to potentially guide players, right? Something about like maybe having these 4 cards always available for purchase. And each of them will have a keyword of just like draw effect. Right? And also this talks about how players draw cards at the end of their turn. This talks about like discarding cards and right, these cards might sort of lead the players to think about different elements of the game that they haven't quite realized yet. Like we can have another card that says like +1 power per card that you destroy this turn, or the toaster. The toaster special ability is +1 power per card you destroy this turn. For every 2 cards that you destroy, because toaster's got 2, 2, 4, 6, right? For every 2 cards that you destroy, do an extra thing. They'll say. So these 4 sort of always being available, though, in theory, should always potentially offer mechanics that can be tapped into. We have right, so we have discard, we have draw, both during a turn and at the end of it, and then destroy effect. Put cards on top of your deck. That's a way to be manipulated as well. What else? What else is another game mechanic that we can think of? And it costs 4. Let's not worry so much about the cost. Maybe it costs 5. Maybe it costs 6. Heck it. Heck it. You can't tell me what to do. Maybe it costs 6. Yeah. Could be anything. What makes us happy? What are we always happy to do? Draw cards. Draw. We got discard. Maybe maybe we put cards in our discard pile on the bottom of our deck. That's a thing we can do. Maybe happy is boring. Maybe being happy is boring. No one really truly wants to be happy. We love the drama. That's why we watch The Bachelor and stuff like that, right? Well, you guys do. I don't. I never watched that show. Disgusting. Disgusting. But if you do, that's cool. And I understand. We love the drama. Maybe this is as simple as just +2 understanding. It costs 3, and it gives a victory point. And that's it. Maybe that's all it needs to be. Maybe that's all it needs to be. Funny enough, though, when it comes to this type of card, in my previous experience with like DC deck building or Marvel Legends, you're never really happy to have to buy a card like this because you'd much rather buy a different card that has this plus other effects on it, which is pretty common. I don't know, maybe it costs 4, but gives 2 VP. Another thing too that we need to consider is the how many of these exist. I assume imagine having like a 4 or 5 player game, and how many of these are sitting in front of players, right? What if we did 4 each total, right? So if all 4 happy cards are purchased, that's it. You can't purchase any more. I think we want to blend availability with board space and things getting too muddled up, right? At the same time, if it's too low, then it's too limiting. And that potential for player expression is lost. I guess too the fact that we're gating the purchase of these cards by having you only purchase one at a time. I think that'll be important. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we do 5 each. Because I just try to imagine like having your 5 cards in your hand. You got like 5 different things already sitting in front of you that you can tap and alternate and do stuff with. And there might also be cards in the main deck that maybe sit in front of us as well. Maybe we don't. Maybe we don't do that. But I think in terms of like the logistics of it all, the clutter, right? When it comes to where's this crap at? Where did we put this? Where did we put this? Right? Remember this image? Imagine if there's like a bunch of crap just like in the middle of it all, right? Sort of just you got like 5 cards laid out in front of you. The table can get very hectic very quickly. Because we can also do something like +1 power per happy tapped. So like the first time you tap a happy emotion, it's +1 power. The second one is +2, so equaling 3. Encouraging a slow build and sort of like this idea of just like happy is happy. The more happy you have, the better it is, right? The more happy, you're always happy, happy. Then you have to like the slow untapping one at a time. That would encourage you to purchase a bunch of them. And that would also be potentially the emotion card that just only synergizes with what? Tapping? With the tapping mechanic concept? That could work. That could work potentially. I don't think we make it 2 VP then. It would have to be per happy card tapped this turn. If you only untap one a turn, then it's just like, oh, I got 5 happy cards tapped. My 6th one I untap, I tap it again. I got +6 for free instantly. It'll have to be happy cards tapped this turn. Something like that. Not super pleased with it still, but I think that's better than just what we have now. Oops, caps lock on. That's what I'm understanding. Per no, what are we doing? Per tap, yeah, plus one understanding per tapped happy. We'll do it this way. Per happy card tapped this turn. So it's very clear. It's very clear. Something like that. I don't know why it's so stretched at the bottom here. Not 100% sure why. This is why. Okay, that's a little bit better, right? Per happy card tapped this turn. So it's a slow build. Maybe that makes sense thematically as well, that happiness is something that you build up slowly over time. Happiness is also a state of mind. I don't know. We don't want to blur too much between like not making good fun cards because they don't make sense narratively, right? But I think the more that we can have them, the more we can have the narrative and the card fit together, the stronger the theme of the deck is. But don't let that get in the way of just designing good cards that are fun to play, right? So happy. Fun card to play. It is good. I think tapping a bunch of these in a single turn and getting a nice big old fat stack of happy understanding would probably be pretty good. And then of course having to untap one card at a time is potentially a slow grind. Maybe we make the happy card the 5 cost. And we'll try what Fear Surprise looks like costing 4. Because another thing too is that over the course of a game, typically you want to destroy your crappy cards. Your starter cards, you want to get rid of them eventually. And so Fear Surprise can potentially become more and more powerful, but also more dangerous as the game goes on, because you're less likely to discard crappy cards and more likely to discard your good cards. Anger discusses the opposite in that as the game goes on, it should in theory get stronger, because if you have less cards in your hand, less cards in your discard pile, your play zone, then this effect becomes less and less. In theory, it's quite good. It's quite good. So maybe this costs 5. And also, too, now that I see this, I think it totally makes sense for there to be a limited number of these cards in general. But 4 now feels too little, right? 4 now feels too little. Because if it costs 5, and you only end up getting 1 of these or 2 of these, doesn't feel quite worth it, right? Maybe we do 6. 6 of each. Maybe Happy costs 2 VP now that it costs 5. This feels better. This feels a little bit better. because then even if you're only purchasing one of them, it's technically a slightly above average VP value to cost that we're sort of going to be working on. The other issue too is that like if somebody goes down the path of purchasing happy cards, and it might disincentivize other players to try and also buy happy cards because it's like, God, I want to spend my turn. I want to spend my turn buying a card that's only going to yield me +1. You know, I gotta buy 2 of them, and then it's only triggering every other turn as far as the maximum effect is concerned and things like that, right? But if it's worth 2 VPs for the cost of 5, then it's not too bad. So maybe helps ease the pain of it all. Heck, maybe we make it even cost 6. And make it cost 3 VP? I don't know. Again, the numbers we'll have to play around with, but we'll do this. I kind of like this idea of this. It's slow burning, but like for the most part, for the cost and the VP value, we're always happy to purchase this. And happiness, I mean, happiness likes company too. Let's get real, right? I know misery also really enjoys having its kickers and stuff like that, but happiness also likes to have parties. I think for sure though, sad and fear, I'm pretty happy with. I'm pretty happy with in general. Maybe just draw a card is a little boring. But I think there's some potential here with like the clear and obvious and like painful downside to this card. And I really like the fact that it costs 2 and it has 0 VP. I like this is a sad card. This is going to be a sad card to purchase, but I think it draw effect is super strong. I think it'll be enough potential here to sort of pull people into purchasing at least one of these cards, right? And also too opposite of happy, like the misery loves company. You can only untap 1 card at a time. So if you tap 3 to get +3 cards this turn, beginning of your next turn, you only tap 1 of them. So you're at 2. And then so now your next turn, right? Now your next turn has 2 less cards in it. It's quite sad. It drags on. It's like depression. Oh my goodness. This is a beautifully designed card. The narrative of this card is deep and sorrowful. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So, feelings. For the sake of happy, right? For the sake of happy, maybe we have a card. Let's look at the sad emotions here. Melancholy, happy is sad, right? Right? How do you spell melancholy? Don't judge me. Don't you dare judge me. Melancholy. Because now I'm thinking in terms of like these feeling cards will be sort of like the more clear cut, obvious cards as far as like synergizing with the emotion cards that you've purchased. But I don't know if we can design a bunch of cards that all do that, right? But I'm thinking melancholy. Is it melancholy like kind of sad? Or isn't it like kind of sad? Go to my favorite website. My favorite website of all time, and I'm not kidding, I'm not joking. Literally my favorite. Dictionary.com. Let's look up melancholy just because I'm interested now. Gloomy state of mind, sober thoughtfulness. Sober thoughtfulness. Well, regardless of the definition, I had an idea when I was designing the sad card that it'll simply read +1 plus an understanding. Wait, maybe I was going to say draw cards equal to the number of sad cards you have tapped. A lot of freaking drawing, though. Maybe we get rid of this. There's just more draw cards here, and it's maybe we don't go in on the, maybe it is +1 understanding per sad card. Do we want to do the quotation marks? I think we get rid of the quotation marks. Tapped. And here's the somber thoughtfulness. You may retain this card. You may retain a keyword. You may retain this card. We'll leave it at that. Well, you may retain. You may retain this card. I think we go over now to our keywords. Retain. Cards with this keyword may be kept in your hand. They kept in their hand. In hand. The end of a player's turn. There's cards kept in hand with this keyword may be kept in hand at the end of the player's turn. Cards kept in hand with this keyword may be kept in hand at the end of the player's turn. It's kind of a funky sentence, but it's technically correct. The idea is if you have a card that says retain and then you play it, the retain is nullified. You can't just pick it back up and then keep it for the next turn, right? The idea is the thoughtful somberness. You keep the card in hand. Cards kept in hand with this keyword may be kept in hand at the end of a player's turn. Cards with cards. Oh, I think. Hold on here. If not played during the player's turn, cards with this keyword may be kept in hand. The end of their turn, and sort of the synergy here that I want to have with the sad card here, is that the rules are going to say, hopefully distinctly, at the end of your turn, the player draws 5 cards into their hand, right? So that the way that the wording is going to be for the turn orders is going to be during your turn, at the beginning of your turn, you untap your emotion card, you play your hand of cards, you do your thing, and then end of turn procedure is going to be discard all of the cards in your play zone that are discard all of the cards that you've played in your play zone, discard all the rest of your cards in your hand into your play zone, and then draw 5 cards. Retain is not going to be a part of those 5 cards drawn. So if you retain a card in your hand, and then you draw 5 cards, you end up with 6 cards in your hand, right? It's not about having a hand limit. It's simply about the fact that at the end of your turn, you draw 5 cards. So the sort of weird synergy here with sadness, potentially, is that you might have 3 sadness cards tapped, which means you only draw 2 cards at the end of your turn. But if you retain it, you can potentially have 3 cards, right? So like maybe there's some synergy there. Potentially, I don't know. I don't know. If not played during the player's turn, cards with this keyword may be kept in hand at the end of their turn. If not played during the player's turn, cards with this keyword may be kept in hand at the end of their turn. Into the end of their turn does not affect how many cards the player draws at the end of their turn. An example, player retains 2 cards, then draws 5 cards per the end of turn. Procedures. Yeah. Player ends up having 7 cards in hand while waiting for their turn. That is retain. That is retain. We just made that up. Did we try? What's going on here? Oh, sorry. I was like, why can't I scroll over? As I'm understanding, per sad card tapped, you may retain this card. I think it's kind of a crappy card. I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna cost real cheap. I think it'll cost 2. Whoops. We gotta copy and paste some spaces. And maybe it's VP value 1 though. VP value 1. So 2-to-1 ratio for VP is very, very good. Very, very good. Sort of painful though. Still painful. Still very painful. This may not be good at all. We'll keep it as is. Keep it as is for the time being. What if it's 2? Maybe 2 is better. We'll keep it at 2. Card that costs 2 gives 1 VP and potentially gives +4 power. That's insane. But you do so at the expense of having 2 less cards in your hand at the beginning of your next turn. That's very painful. I think we'll leave it at that for now. Right? What are some happy words? We got disapproval, shocked, scared, propaganda, jubilant, right? Jubilant. Let's get some happiness in here. Put some happiness in there. What's a positive word for surprised? Amazement. Ooh, ah. Look at my emotion roll here. My motion wheel here. Learn about confusion. Eager. Where was eager from? I don't know what eager's from. Actually, let's try and line them up here. Let's try and line them up here. Angry, I think, could be propaganda, or potentially. No, I guess propaganda is usually typically used to spur anger, right? distrust, disgust. Let's try and do a line of 4 for anger, line of 4 for sadness, right? So this would be like get lonely in there for sadness. Rest. Guilt. How you guys feeling? Let's have this right here be surprised. We'll have awe. Shocked. I like shocked. Eager is for surprise. Interesting. Interesting. We'll have confusion. Right, we have awe, shocked, confusion, excited. Excited. So I guess we'll start with the idea of just like 4 cards for each of the emotions right now, right? Propaganda. Let's do bitter. I'm just choosing. I'm just looking at words and picking them. Embarrassed, right? And so the narrative here is that purchasing this card would imply that our inanimate object has learned and now understands these emotions. Let's see a deal, right? Propaganda, bitter, embarrassed. I don't know, is propaganda more logical? Creative? Maybe we'll leave propaganda out. So I like the idea of it. We'll do, yeah, man, it's too much like anger, right? Frustrated, bitter, embarrassed. Judgmental. Look at these feelings. What about happiness, though? Don't forget about happiness. Ooh, like hopeful. Like that's cheeky. We can do cheeky. Content. I have a big old wheel here, so you guys can see what I'm looking at. Literally looking at this. Just sort of going around it, looking at cards or looking at emotion titles that just sort of quickly resonate with me. It's like something that maybe could be a card type. Respect. Maybe we'll just do joy, or we'll do jubilant. I don't think I see jubilant on here. Yeah, because it's just joy, right? And not all of these necessarily need to synergize with the sad cards themselves, right? Or like the emotion cards that they synergize with, in theory. But maybe content has something to do with retain. What if we get a card for content? Because I had the idea of like keeping cards in hand. Maybe this breaks the retain rule here. You may retain cards in your play zone at the end of your turn. Equal to the number of happy cards that you have or tapped. Maybe we like tapped. This could be crazy powerful late game. Can you imagine having like a 10 plus power turn and being able to retain 3 or 4 of those cards that allow you to do it? So maybe this is all this card does. Cost 4. DP1, it's like purely synergetic. Like you would never purchase this card unless you had already invested in the happy cards. Which maybe makes sense because the happy card is designed to be heavily invested into to begin with. It's an idea. Just an idea. And I'm quite pleased with it. Not that I think this is necessarily a well balanced card, right? I don't think that this is a well balanced card. But the fact that we are going down this vein of narrative of like happiness and happiness connected to contentment, and then me reading the word content literally drew me to this idea of like retaining cards. There's probably a million different ways that we can write this card. Contentment can simply mean like could be literally anything else as far as just like I don't know. Content can talk about anything else as far as like keeping things stable. With content that like cards that you purchase this turn are not replaced in the lineup, and so like your opponent's turn has less cards in the lineup. Sort of a brutal thing for happiness, right? But content can simply say also +1 power per card per happy card you have tapped, and so it's like fills in the weakness of the happy cards in general, right? Kind of pleased with that though. We'll leave it as is. We'll leave it as is for now. Interesting. What if we did something like this for hopeful? Hello. Oops. We may put one card from your discard pile or play zone into your deck. Then shuffle and this could be a real game slower though. Then shuffle. And then it is draw one. I like the idea. I think it makes sense for hopeful. It also doesn't, it doesn't need to sort of always play into the happy cards, right? Maybe it's above average, slightly above average cost. Something like that, right? Something like that. And respect. Respect is something that's given to other players. Given to others around you. Oh, how about this? How about this? each foe may choose to draw one. For each that do, you draw one. And respect. I like it. We respect. How much does this cost, though? How much does this cost? Potentially draw 3 cards. We'll make it cost 5. BP1. Yeah. Interesting. Sort of interesting cards here. Not a whole lot of power being produced here. Not a lot of understanding being gained. We'll replace this. I was thinking about and I had already written down here self-care. And that reminded me of Parks and Recreation, which is my favorite TV show. I prefer it over The Office. Come at me. I love Parks and Rec. By far my favorite, as far as like those kind of TV shows go. TV shows in general. I don't really stick with TV shows for very long, but Parks and Rec I followed all the way to the end. Really, really loved it. In honor of them. We go treat yourself as happiness. As happiness. It can be as simple as gain 1 card from the lineup. Put it. Whoops. What? Hello? Control print. Put it on top of your deck. Cost 6. Quite the powerful effect. Could be very good. Could be very, very good. Maybe it costs 5. All right, let's make it cost 6 for now. And I guess we can do VP2. Treat yourself. And gaining a card is just basically you take a card in the lineup and it becomes yours. Typically gained cards will go into the discard pile immediately, but obviously this would circumvent that. So in theory, we could just like acquire a card that costs 8 understanding, which would be very expensive. And put it on top of our deck, and so there's a lot of potential there, synergies and stuff like that. You can play this card and then tap a happy card, or tap a sad card. Yeah. Lonely. My first thought was lonely. Right now was plus an understanding. For each sad card you have for each sad card more. For each sad card you have I'm trying to say that let's say you have 3 sad cards and nobody else in the game has any sad cards. Playing lonely would give you +3 power. What if you had 6 sad cards and somebody else in the game had 4? Lonely would give you +2 power, right? So the difference, if you have the most sad cards, then this card works. If you don't have the most sad cards, then this card would literally do nothing. For each sad card you have more. I don't know how to word this. For each sad card you have beyond the... For each sad card, for each additional sad card, sad oops, card you have over the second player, over the player who has the second most sad cards. +1 understanding for each sad card you have over the player who has the second most sad cards. This sentence is so stupid. Does that make sense though? And it gives the impression that you have the most sadness, so you're the most lonely, but you only have plus understanding equal to the difference. Can we word this any other way? +1 understanding, or +1 understanding for each understanding equal to the difference of sad cards owned. We spelled difference wrong. the difference of sad cards owned. I don't know. This I can't do it. I can't do it. Lonely, 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 lonely. Not sure. Guilt. I feel like guilt can sometimes be anger. Maybe we have a card here that both synergizes with sad and anger. Or like maybe it's like plus +1 understanding per anger, disgust, and sad cards tapped. Can be a lot. It's hard. It's hard to measure how much potential there is with a lot of these cards. Maybe it's 5. Guilt. Not sure. Not sure. But a boring card in general, sort of, but interesting in that it synergizes with two different emotions. All right, because keep in mind, all of these cards here fall into the category of feelings. Are feelings, right? Judgmental. I got one for this. Choose an opponent. They reveal their hand. I don't know. I'm trying to avoid the idea of like when you have like I want this to have a negative effect to it, where the player has to discard a card, and then he chooses a player, and he gets to play a card from their hand. Judgmental. But I'm trying to avoid having to write must discard a card in order to play this card. I'm trying to avoid that text, but maybe we just write it down. Maybe we go there and have no fear of it, right? Maybe we just try and do that. Also, really hope I moved the microphone to a different place on my table. Really hope that there's no point where like I'm talking but it's silent, because I do have noise gate software on to help. I mean, when I'm gaming, to help prevent like mouse clicks and keyboard smashes, to limit that, right? The second I bought a microphone beyond my headset, right? My first like ever non-headset microphone, my first ever desk microphone. It has the potential to be mounted, but I can't afford it, right? I immediately realized why you want the mount, because this thing is sitting on your desk and it feels all of the vibrations, because sound travels super well through solid objects. Um, why you want the mount? Because literally everything that I do, if if I if a piece of dust lands on my table, you can hear it on the microphone. I was trying a feather, a piece of dust, a feather. I was trying to think of something to something light for the for the exaggeration, right? If a giant were to sneeze on my table, you would be able to feel it. Anyways, what if the effect is like discard a card from the top of your deck, choose a player, you may play a card from their hand with cost equal to or greater than the card that you discarded. And that would super synergize with anger, right? Super duper synergize with anger. Let's do that. Discard the top card of your deck. Choose a player. You may play a card from their hand equal to or greater than the cost of the card you discarded. And so in order for this card to hit properly, you want to trigger anger first, right? Because that'll guarantee that you discard a starter card, and that is the most bang for your buck. Because if you don't, and you discard a decent card, you run the risk of not being able to play good cards in their hand, right? We'll leave it as is, I think, for now. What does this cost, though? Also, too, sort of anti-synergy is that typically we want to be destroying our starter cards, which makes the anger emotion cards stronger because there'll be less and less starters to put on top of your deck, which means that this card will get weaker over time, while anger is getting stronger over time. But that's also sort of mixed with the idea that as the game goes on, there's more and more chance that your opponents are going to have really strong cards in their hand. Sort of interesting card. Starts off slow, though. Right? Starts off slow. I don't know. I feel like 4 is like such a safe number. 4 is such a safe number for a lot of these cards, it feels like. Embarrassed. Embarrassed. Card from their hand with cost equal to cost equal to or greater than the card you discarded. I don't know if that wording is any better or not. Also, too, are these cards too complex? I feel like if we just had a lineup filled with cards that were written like this, a real pain in the butt. These are just the feeling cards, right? All the feeling cards will look like this. Maybe the logic cards will be more straightforward. Right, right. Potentially. That's the way, too, that we can help differentiate the game. The feel of the game is that all the logic cards will be sort of themed differently, so they'll feel different. These are all, for the most part, pretty wordy and pretty specific in what they do. Kind of unique in what they do. I really like this hopeful card. I was just reading this again. I was like, yeah, this is a cool card. Especially too, if you imagine like having maybe like having 2 or 3 cards in your deck at that moment, and then putting a really powerful card in your hand, you really could have a moment of like hopefulness, drawing that super awesome card. Embarrassed. Could there be a gamble here? Could there be like maybe there's another anti-synergistic thing here, right? Because maybe like anger doesn't it's not always the best thing, right? So maybe the anger feeling cards have the least synergy overall. Because what if it was like maybe it was like choose a player, you both reveal the top card of your deck. If your card is ooh, yeah, if your card costs more, draw it. If your card costs less, put it on the bottom of your deck. Embarrassed? In comparison here? foe. Foe is the word. Choose a foe. Reveal the top card of your you and the foe each both reveal the top card of your decks. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's this. Choose a foe. Well, I do like the idea, because the idea is here, reveal the top card of your deck. Each player does so. Whoever has the most expensive card gets to draw it. The other player who doesn't get to draw their card puts that card on the bottom of their deck. Embarrassed. You can also do choose a foe. Reveal the most expensive card in your deck. I mean, in your hand. Whoever does so gets to draw a card. Yeah, that's still technically anti-synergistic with the anger effect of putting starters on top of your deck. Choose a foe. That might be easier to type, just to type in, right? Embarrassed. Maybe that's more personal too, because you know what cards you have in your hand, so you might be feeling confident that you can beat someone with that cost. And then if you lose, you're very yeah. Let's do that. Choose a foe. You both reveal the most. You both reveal the highest cost card in your hand. Player with the highest cost draws a card. But what about putting something on the bottom of your deck? Maybe we don't do that at all. How much does this card cost to purchase in general? Cost. It's got to do more than just draw a card here. Draws a card. Player with the highest cost draws a card. Draws two cards. Draws a card. Now, if you win, draw two. There needs to be more like, right? Because, like, why would we ever run this card over a card that simply says draw a card, right? So there needs to be some sort of above average potential here to be gained for what this card is going to cost ultimately. We can also just make it cost one and be one VP. Potentially. But then it's like that the card in itself is just like a card that sometimes draws a card and sometimes it does nothing. I don't know. I don't know. So there either needs to be two effects here, Or this card costs 1 and gives 1 VP, which is just like a 1-for-1 ratio that no other card in the whole game will have. Player with the lower cost card. Let's do the cycle ones. Does it lower with the lower cost card cycles 1? Play with the higher cost card. If it's draw 2, cycle 2. And this is still anti-synergistic because if you end up losing this and you have recently used your anger cards and you know what's on top of your deck as starter cards, and the cycle is actually bad. The draw 2, though, is not horrible. Potentially. I think we make this a 3-coster. I was saying 4 in my gut, but this is a 3-coster. The 3-coster card that costs 3 but can potentially draw through 2 cards. That's huge. Huge. Even the fact that it's cycle 2, I think, is solid enough for what it does. Bitter. I was thinking that maybe to continue along the theme of being anti-synergistic with the anger emotions, this card is each player gains 1 starter card from the destroyed pile, starting with you. Starting with you going clockwise. Going counterclockwise. Typically in a game like this, you play clockwise, right? You play clockwise. That's the turn order. Maybe part of the bitterment is that you punish the players who play before you because they technically have an opportunity. If the game ends before your turn in this current round, then those players who have gone before you technically have an opportunity to take an extra turn where you don't. So you punish them for going ahead of you. Starting with you going, each player gains 1 starter card from the destroyed pile, starting with you going counterclockwise. Is counterclockwise 1 word? Don't judge me. It is. It looks horrible. What a horrible looking word. Who made this word? Starting with you going counterclockwise. Maybe we say starting with you. Maybe starting with you going counterclockwise. Each player gains 1 starter card from the destroyed pile. But because it starts with us, we are guaranteed to get the effect. Not everyone necessarily affected, right? So if there's only 3 cards. Ooh, and then what if we do this? Plus 1 understanding per starter card. Removed from the destroyed pile this turn. And now we have another card potentially somewhere down the line that also removes starter cards from the destroyed pile. And there's some sort of weird wombo combo potential between this card and that card. Kablam. Kachow. Kachuga. Kachuga. Definitely a bigger fan of Kachuga than Kachow. But what does this cost? In the early game, I mean, this is a card that can potentially be a +5 power card, +4 power card, just depending on how many starter cards are in the destroyed pile. Of course, if you use it consecutively, it should eventually yield less and less power over time, right? This is a cool card. I really like this card. This is a really cool interaction. It's also player interaction. And also, too, it makes everyone else bitter as well. Oh, the theme. The thematics. The thematics. I'm quite enjoying this. I'm quite enjoying this quite a bit. And I think, too, with like so many weird functioning cards here in the feeling cards so far, I think definitely we need the logic cards to be more grounded, more down to earth, more straightforward, like +1 power draw cards, stuff like that. Super clean cut. Does what you think, nothing. And I don't know, creativity. What do we do with that crap? Going on 2 hours here. I would like to finish this out, but I don't think we're going to. How much does this cost? Potentially a lot of power. I mean, it's going to vary dramatically on how many ways all of the players end up having as far as destroying cards. Funny enough, too, imagine being the player who ends up being affected last by this card. And you end up being the person who has lots of destroy. So you're like destroying 1, 2 cards every other turn. And then somebody else plays this card. It's like you're not going to get those starter cards back, but somebody else is going to. There's a lot of potential bitterment there. This card can actually ruin games. Can totally ruin someone's gameplay. I mean, for the most part, if we look at this, if we think about the idea of statistics, if we have one of these cards in the entirety of the deck, chances are this card will come out later into the game if it does at all. And if it does later into the game, it's going to have some real potential for hitting hard. Let's make this cost 6. This 6 coster. This costs 6. We got to copy some spaces. How many VPs? How many VPs? Maybe we make it cost 2 VPs. Keep it on par with 3 for 1. I think 3 for 1 will sort of be our standardy for cost to VP value, with 2 to 1 being above average, 4 to 1 being below average. 3 to 1 I think is a good place. So it'll sort of keep in par with that standard. So at the very least, the VPs is not a means to disincentivize buying this card or not. And it's also just anti-synergistic with the anger cards. Ooh, frustrating. Let's make a card that synergizes with anger here. My thought here. My thought here. Costs. Costs 1 or greater. Oops. Hold on. I was thinking if it costs 1 or greater, draw it. If it doesn't, repeat this process until you've sort of like a way to dig through all the starter cards that you've potentially put on top of your deck. Sort of like a mega wombo combo-y sort of thing. But maybe it's all discard. Reveal the top card of your deck. No, maybe it is discard cards from the top of your deck until you have discarded a card that costs or greater. This can have huge, huge potential, even outside of anger synergy. Sort of allows you to use the anger card freely. What do I do? I got my microphones in front of my computer. The emotion cards onto the same area as the card types. So it synergizes with the anger card, sort of removing the negative effect of it, essentially. But it's also really good just in general to cycle your deck out. Also, we can have other cards, wombo combo setups where it's like plus one understanding per card that you have per discard per card that you've discarded this turn, right? Stuff like that. But also too, if we have it yield no power here, I think we can make this card relatively cheap. I think this card can be relatively cheap. Because for the most part, this card won't have any value outside of combining it with something else. So we'll make it above average VP value. Not only that, you discard a good card as well, potentially, and that maybe that's the frustrating part of it all. Can we have this card do anything else to raise its cost, or we keep it as a 2-1, and it's sort of like it's a weird card. It's definitely a card that only works with other stuff, essentially. Can we add anything to it? Can we add anything to it that makes sense? Makes sense. Maybe not the best card. Maybe not the best card. Again, too, right? Some of these cards just maybe they don't hit home. Maybe they're too slow. Maybe they're too clunky or weird. Also, too, I was just looking at we have a card right here that has plus understanding per sad card tapped. With essentially the same thing over here with guilt. Maybe we don't like that. Maybe we don't. I don't like that. I don't like this. Get this card out of here. Disgusting. This is disgusting. I'm guilty of writing this card. Rated. Maybe, maybe not. Well, I think we'll call it here for tonight. I'm happy with the progress that we've made. Feels slow though. honestly, progress real slow. I'm actually really surprised that we're 2 hours into this. Holy crap! But I'm pretty happy with these for the most part. I think these are solid enough to get started. I think we need to sort of pumping. I think at some point I'll need to have some sort of systematic way of making some of these cards because for the most part, I'll need to think about in general, right? Like what makes deck building games fun. Just think about just like there needs to be some solid foundational cards, right? Because some of these cards are situational, some of these cards are inconsistent, or they have to synergize with something else that's going on. We're going to need a nice, solid foundation of cards that just help the players grow naturally. Because otherwise, if we have too many cards that look like these cards, you end up with just like stalling out. Players just not being able to make very much progress and stalling out. I guess that's all part, and we want the like a nice steady growth overall for the most part. But this is good enough. Good enough start. I think for the most part too, if you're watching and you are, I think if you're watching, I think hopefully now you have a far more solid understanding of what's happening here, what we're trying to accomplish with this deck building game, what we're trying to do overall, right? Right. Yeah, and I think that should be really good. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. And I will again too. Feel free to any suggestions in the comments. I'm all if you're okay with me not responding or saying cool, thanks for the suggestion, and it not being used. I'm cool with you making any number of suggestions in the world. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it, and I will see you in the future.